I'm Clint, and welcome to Swatches Livestream number 58. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Siren and Enchanter Art Challenge entries submitted in by you guys, the viewers of the channel. I'm, of course, Clint Cearley, artist and art educator, best known for my work with Magic the Gathering. But yeah, this episode is all about you and what you guys have created, so welcome. We're going to be going through a couple of announcements and just general channel information and allow people to join in live and then get into the actual feedback and critiques of the entries. We have 11 images this time around, and we already have a handful of people here in the live chat. Everything looks pretty good on this side, so I'm gonna minimize some of my windows and get ready to jump into this. Emmanuel, Esri, good to see you guys. Nagatama, first time catching it live. Well, thank you, appreciate you taking the time. I know this is a pretty good time for me, but we have quite a few viewers overseas, and this is like 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning for them. So if you are staying up late, thank you for making the time. Okay, so this challenge, it is a ticket-only challenge. It used to be open for all viewers, but we got to the point where we had so many entries, I could not reasonably get through them all in a stream. So we have pared it down to 11 entries out of 12 tickets. One person was late submitting. But yeah, we got those, and it's pretty much a split between the two. Now this time around we have a double header or a double feature for the challenge, and we're going to take a look at the outline for the challenge first, so you see what these guys are trying to create, and then we're going to take a look at the images. So the artist had a choice between two different images they wanted to create and send in. One was either the Siren, which was from classic myth, or an Enchanter's workshop, essentially. And you have 4 weeks to create the image, 2 weeks to create a concept and send it in, which is what we're going to be looking at today. Then after this, they will have 2 more weeks to finish the image and submit it in, and we will take a look at it again in 2 weeks. Now at that time, we're going to kick off a new art challenge. This is a repeating monthly challenge. So if you like the look of what you're seeing here in this episode and you want to get in on the next one, then take a look in 2 weeks. Probably 2 weeks and a day. It would be the Saturday that we would start a new challenge where you could purchase a ticket. All right, just taking a look. Of course, you guys, if you're joining in live in the chat and you want to toss me a question, then feel free to put your comment there in the live chat. Make sure you put swatches at the beginning of your comment so that it will flag it for me, and I will try to answer it if I see it flagged. Yeah, we have several new people in the challenge that haven't joined in before, so that's pretty cool, pretty cool. I am currently streaming out of Central Tennessee in the United States of America, and it is raining. You might hear a little of the drizzle in the background. Okay, so for the Siren image, well, either image could be digital or traditional, so it's up to you. And style-wise, you can pretty much do what you wanted. The Siren depict a siren from myth standing in the surf or on a beach during ominous weather. She should be alluring and a passive pose, long hair, draped white fabrics. But on closer inspection, there should be skeletons or bones of her victims somewhere in the scene. And just kind of thinking through what you want to do as far as the narrative, maybe showing some shipwrecks, showing some stuff that's washed ashore from the shipwrecks, and thinking about the lighting, how you want to handle that. Probably something more ominous, foggy, not something bright and cheerful. Okay, Matt says, thanks again for spotting my message when I overlooked the link earlier today. My bad, I was in London all last week. Hey, I understand it. People get busy, and you also don't account for the time zone thing, but we noticed it and we got it in there, so all's good. But don't count on that next time. It might be that my internet goes out or something and I'm not able to check it until too late. So if in doubt, submit early. Or you could choose to do the Enchanter image, which is depict the work of a enchanter. Think of a think of a hardy work table littered with raw materials, tools, half-finished projects, scrolls with designs, maybe dirty dishes. The image could be full scenes such as a table, items, cat napping in the corner, sunlight coming through a window, or it could be more just like a collection of a couple of items, not a big scope to the image. Good material rendering is important for this subject. Make sure you have reference for all the materials, such as brass, crystal, old paper, etc. Then just kind of thinking through what that enchanter does, what they're making, what the materials would be, what the tools they would need to be in order to do what they're trying to build, and tell a little of the narrative, just kind of unfold this person's life. And in a way, it's almost the non-portrait portrait, where you're telling about this character without showing the character. It's showing the life of the character without the character. So interesting. And we have, I believe, 6 of one and 5 of the other as far as the challenge goes. Okay, couple of announcements. First, just take for a minute in case I forget. Painting process. The new video that I put out on the painting process guide that comes with the files to go along with the video is available on the store at swatchesart.com. I get the entire creation process and I put it into 10 steps. This is an hour-and-a-half long video, and I go over what to do at each step. A lot of the problems that I see over and over of people submitting art is they are not doing what they need to do at the right stage, or they're getting the stages out of order. And by the time they get later in the process, any change that they make is going to take a lot more effort and a lot more time than it really needs to be. So that's why we created this video painting process guide. And yeah, if you're interested in that, I believe it's at $15. So you pick it up at swatchesart.com. Next up is wow, there's a lot of space between those two lines. Vibrance. It has been like 2 years since we did a Vibrance episode, but I was thinking about what to do now that we're doing bi-weekly streams for the challenge. What are we going to do in the middle weeks? And I'm going to start doing Vibrance. I think it is very apt thing to do, and now if you're not familiar, Vibrance is the ongoing series that I started a while back about the habits, health, and attitudes that we artists need to face, and basically people in general, not just artists. These are the things that will ultimately get you ahead in your life and pursuits. And it's basically the inner game. The outer game is all of the art technique and skills. But even if you have great outer game and you don't have good inner game, which is your habits, your health, your attitude, then you will always reach a ceiling. So you want to be strong in both games, and then that's where you're really going to start succeeding. See that you can paint really well, but you have a crappy work ethic and you are too lazy or procrastinate too much, then you're never going to achieve anything. So we're going to start the Vibrance episode. The idea is I'm going to record a short episode this week. I will set it as a premiere for next Friday. That means that it will start at the normal 7 p.m., but it will be a recorded video. If you go in there and you start watching it at 7 p.m., you can join everyone else that is joining there at 7 p.m., including me. And you can talk to each other in the live stream. Now, following the episode, I will do a live stream Q&A. So if we want to talk about some of the things that came up in the episode and you want to join in on that discussion, then that is the place to do it. And what this will do is separate the live stream from the actual episode. Now, previously I did it all together, and I don't think that was a great idea because it ended up making like hour-and-a-half episodes, which if you're browsing around on YouTube, it's like, oh, that's an interesting topic, but it's an hour-and-a-half. I don't want to watch that. So this will keep the main episode just being probably under 10 minutes. Then the Q&A after show can go ever how long we want to go. All right, Iris asked, how do you inspire yourself to do art when you feel bored or too overworked with art and don't feel like you're getting anywhere with it? One of the first things I would say, Iris, is that It's easy for us to get in the mode of, I always have to be working. And you don't. The fact is the brain needs downtime. It needs time to decompress and to recharge before you go back in. So if you've been working nonstop, you've been working all day and you're trying to jump back into your painting, or you worked all the way through the week and you do the weekend, your brain might need half a day off. Just give it a chance. Now, if you're charged up, but you're still not real motivated, then I would say working on a schedule is good. You're trying to produce something every day, or you're trying to produce this by a certain deadline. Deadlines can help motivate you. Also, if you have a couple of projects that you have going on, your kind of in the back burner that you can jump on. So starting something from scratch might be a little intimidating. So if you have something that's already kind of going, then you don't have to worry about getting that initial spark and getting the momentum. That can help. Or if you want to just focus on, instead of doing the whole process and worried about I have to do something of really high quality, just focus on a couple of techniques. Do some studies. Narrowing down what you need to do at that stage can be really helpful. So it might be like going to a site that has gesture poses and go out there and just say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do 20 minutes of gesture poses at like 1 minute poses. And it's something very defined, and your brain can go, okay, for 20 minutes, I can do that for 20 minutes. And that's a good way to spend some time. And just really apply yourself for those 20 minutes. And then if you still want to keep going, keep going. But if you feel like you want to take off, then take off. Okay, next thing is, of course, 2 weeks. We'll get back on to the finals for this. All right, that's it as far as the announcements. I don't think I need that anymore. I'll go ahead and close that out. Emmanuel asks, hi, I am a card artist. I am a card art artist, mainly focusing on making more toonie images. How do you get your first card art commission? Did it lead into the rest of your career, or are they a bit specced out? Okay. I'm not sure what you mean by specced out, or spaced out? You might need to clarify that for me. How did I get my first card art commission? I had done a variety of images and worked up a small portfolio, a few clients, and then I submitted my work to Wizards of the Coast. It was the first card art that I did, and they liked the work, so I started doing work with them. Then once my stuff started being released by Wizards, then it was kind of it's almost like an approval was put on me, where other companies are going, oh, well, if he's working for Wizards, then he must be okay. And then I started getting offers from other people. So in that case, I was the one to build up the portfolio. Then I took the initiative to go out there and try to find a company that I wanted to work for and send in my stuff. And I was able to pick up work that way. So I would suggest trying to find a company, or probably several companies, you never know who has opening, that have a style that matches up with what you do. And most of those companies will have a art submission email address or instructions about how to, who to send it to, or a Dropbox or something. You might have to Google around. You might have to shoot somebody an email and just say, hey, I'm interested in working with you guys. Where would be the right place to send you a portfolio, that sort of thing. And yeah, that's what I'd recommend. Tomas says, I watched all your Vibrance vids, and honestly, your advice can be applied to any career or life path. I'm happy about the news. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, most of that stuff, when it comes to habits and just, self-motivation, getting yourself in better shape, stepping up your mental game and having a better mental attitude, yeah, that applies to everything. And that's the whole idea, is that if you can do better with those things, it bleeds over into your art, right? It will help everything. When you have more energy, that's going to help everything. When you can think more clearly, that's going to help everything. When you have a positive attitude, that's going to help everything. And as I've said in the other videos, I mean, it ranges from just enjoying your day more, enjoying your work more, to improving your relationships. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it as well. And those will also come with challenges. So those will have like weekly and monthly challenges on the inner game stuff. So very cool, very cool. I think that's it. Okay, so we have these 12 entries, and something else. Manuel just commented, said thank you. Something else you might want to do, Emmanuel, is the industry is growing a lot, and what you can do. Man, I'm getting a red tag from YouTube saying the stream is low quality. Interesting. Nope, that's the wrong one. I'm getting some dropped frames. Well, I'm not sure what to do about that. Without stopping the stream, I can't really change any of my settings. I'm not dropping very much. I dropped a packet at one point, but that's it. You guys let me know if it's in bad shape. I tested it earlier and everything was green, so I don't know why it's giving me bad connection now. But you might want to go look at websites, forums, Facebook groups that are about game developers, and look to see who is building games, and make sure that your stuff is posted on a lot of platforms. If you're trying to find work like that, then have an ArtStation account, have a Facebook page for just your art, have an Instagram account, maybe even a Deviant. I still get people contact me through DeviantArt, even though that's not like a real professional site. Put it out there, and just be, try to be available. Try to make yourself seen. Okay, first up is Anika. Hopefully I said that right. I'm not familiar with your name, but you are alphabetically first, so we will go with you. Now, I put in notes. Previously, I opened these up, and I wrote the notes down. I haven't really done much as far as like paint over or anything, but we're going to talk through this. First up, let's take a look at the comments. Mr. Clint, I'm a really big fan of your work. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. My goal for this painting is I want my work to be easy and quick to read, and also always feel my work doesn't look right. It doesn't feel MTG-ish at all. Hope you can help me with all that problem. Thanks. Okay, so that's the first thing is I appreciate you letting me know that is the direction, and that black will not show up. I need a different color. There we go, that's better. So you're wanting to go with like an MTG style, and this would, if that's not MTG, it's really close. So I don't know where that's from, but that would be more of the same. So what is it that MTG is known for, or what does it, what is that style, kind of entail? And then where is your piece and what is the difference? And then we can figure out what that difference is. We can apply it, back on yours. I would say one of the major things about MTG and your image is the use of space, and that MTG images have a lot more bigger characters. We try to pack in as much oomph into the frames as we really can, and very dynamic. It has to do with a lot of dynamic shapes, dynamic movement, dynamic lighting. And one of the things that they tell us is, very cinematic. They want a very cinematic scene. something that has very captivating lighting, a lot of motion and stuff in it. Now, just a second. Yep, somebody's trying to make trouble in the chat. Had a tossing. Okay. So we want to try to make better use of the space. Now, I'm also going to say something here where your image is diverging from MTG, but that's not a bad thing. We also have to think about what this image needs. And MTG is usually about combat and fighting, but sometimes there's really cool kind of quiet scenes, and that's what you want to go for here. There's not all fireballs and people, running around and stuff. So one of the first things I'm going to look at is number 2 here, which is the size. And the components of the scene look pretty good, and that's not my biggest problem. But I don't know why she needs to be this size in this frame, because we have a lot of frame up here. So if we were to just grab this, and let's turn the notes off. My other keyboard started going out, and now I'm using this keyboard. It takes me a second because the keys aren't in quite the same spot. So if we were to do that, now that would be using a lot more of the frame. And that would be more MTG and just, better use. We're just moving way closer to the subject. And I think that would overall be a better idea, getting closer to her. Here you're giving a really, really quiet, far away feel, which isn't bad. You could even split the difference if you wanted that much atmosphere. And I feel like you're trying to go for that. So I think you can sort of split the difference and it would give you the best of both. The main thing here is let's try to get her a little bit bigger, but also we want her to overlap this boat or the shipwreck in the background. So we want that head to break right there. So I would suggest grabbing basically this. And then there we go. I don't think we actually even need that side of it. Now, that would be a lot closer, I think, for the composition and use of the whole scene. And you give you a lot of the feeling of the mist and the ship in the background, and gets you close enough to her that we can get some more detail out of her. And you can also read it from a smaller, view, a thumbnail shape. Okay, now going back to notes, let's pull those off. Number 3 is the pose. I feel like you can probably get a little more out of this pose. Now, I didn't draw what that would look like, but the idea is that she's not very alluring. I mean, she's just sitting there very passively, that's fine. But I'm wondering if you could try to make her one direction or the other. She's not anything right now. You can make her a little creepier if you wanted to go that side. You already have a more inhuman design to the face, which we can pull in, and the viewers can take a look at that, which is good. I think that could be on the right line. I have no problem with that. But if you were to even just have her head turned and she's kind of turning her head back and giving you like this side eye, then it gives her a bit more of the mystery. If you were to, you could change her attitude by making her more reclusive. If you were to arch her back, right? And she's doing this sort of thing, kind of like turning around to look at you, and she's hunching over more. Or you could try to play up more of a sensual nature with her. And I would just suggest going out to search engine, search for like women reclining photo poses. Basically the poses that a photographer would want to use to make a lady look alluring. So, I mean, you can just, there's whole websites that just tips on posing models, and literally that's what you're doing, but it's a fictional model. So you're probably looking at like S-curves, you know, if you can get more curve out of the body, or how to twist the body. One of the things is usually, you know, it's trying to get the lady's chest out, and what you want to do is use the silhouette on the side would be the chest rather than the arm. Then you get, that is more sensual than having this. So hopefully that makes sense, but that direction with it. Next up, number 4. Okay, let me pull that off, and this will make sense. Right now, we've got this kind of compartmentalizing the different elements where everything sits in its own little spot, and there's not enough natural overlapping and irregularity to the placement. What I mean is this sits in this shape, and that shape. Everybody just sits by themselves, and nobody touches anybody. It's like there's a little force field around every object, keeping them away from each other. We want to try to do away with that. So if we push it to something like this, then we don't want this even on the background. I would say just take those two out. They're not doing enough for you. And then these two guys are too even. So maybe like this rock, instead of just being this perfect little shape here, is like, it's kind of an angled rock that does more like that, and then it goes into the water on the bottom, right? Then there's some small rocks. Then maybe you have a rock right here that overlaps it. But then instead of having another rock over here that's completely symmetrical, maybe that's where you start seeing some of the bodies, or bones or something. And then you don't want to have two perfect rocks on the other side, on both sides. Again, it's too symmetrical. And if you do, then don't have them perfectly around the other one. Make sure that they're overlapping each other in a natural way. I'd say back here, take a look at some photographs of an actual shoreline and the rocks, and try to find some natural patterns to how some of these rocks might, break up, and you find the pattern of them in the water back there. Yeah. Jonathan says, Swatches, I missed last week's stream and catching up on today's announcements. But did I just watch a new video intro? Yes, you did. I actually put together that this afternoon. So it's got a couple of little bumps in it, but I'll try to, correct that, and then I can update that along with, whatever's news going on, and that way I can sort of work in some of the announcements into just the filler video. And then it gives me a chance to also look at the stream quality and make sure everything's good before I actually go on camera. So, okay, that's that. So, try not to keep them compartmentalized, a little more overlapping, a little more natural irregularity to the shapes and the placements of things. Next up, Solo on that guy. So this guy, again, this is a little too well placed, too perfect, that he's centered right in the middle between these things on the middle of the image. It's too posed. And also there's just one of him. So I'm going to suggest that you move away from just having the one to having at least 3 or pieces. Like you see a hand here, a head here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a whole body. You can just kind of see, a hand sticking out. You can see kind of an elbow sticking out, a head, a skull, that sort of thing. And that they're just kind of piled on top of each other or washed up onto a rock. And not just centered, but, some here, some there, and probably not perfectly flat. Right. Again, irregularity, a little more. Okay, 6, color, yeah. Now, you had, I like your value scheme, and I actually like your color scheme, but I think you'd probably push it even further with the color. Oh, yeah, forgot to turn this one. This came to mind when I looked at yours because I think you could get a lot more depth out of your background than what you have. And this is really cool where you have like the layers of shipwrecks or the ships and the ropes and the light coming through them. And so if you took that approach, then you could have like part of a shipwreck bow maybe here. And you have the, this, and this has a beam coming up. Then you have that one, but this one has, a gap in the front of this, and you see some of the boards sticking out. Then it has maybe a hole in the side where it's got that. And some of it's filtering off into soft edges, and some of it's not. And maybe you have a rock sticking up and some more wood sticking out from here. So building up some more layers to it, and then letting that fog kind of come in and out of it. That could be interesting. Last one is this. And I just went to my palette selector PSD, and it looks like you're running on this sort of thing, which is pretty cool. And if you could follow that, that would be nice. I mean, it could make it simple for you. But I'm going to set a overlay layer. I particularly like the idea of these purple rocks. And I think that you could even go more with it. And that, I mean, this might be a little too vibrant. Or we might want to push them to the bluish side. But something on that line is pretty cool. So most of it's going to be very desaturated in the gray tones. Then you're going to have these unusual kind of purplish reddish rocks. And that would make it pretty unique. It would make this place seem a little unnatural, a little interesting. And then playing that same color off of her skin tone or her lip tones would also be good. And something else that you could consider adding into, like, parts of the hand or the feet go into that same sort of color. Okay, well, that is it for your image. Thank you for sending it in. I think you have a lovely beginning and concept to the piece. I really don't think you need to change a lot here. Like, you don't need to change your concept. Thank you, Photoshop. Appreciate it. So try to deal with the overall stuff that I talked about with the shapes, placements, just the overlapping, that sort of thing. And see about pushing your character either being a little more sinister, a little more sexy. One way or the other is probably going to be better. So, and I like your direction as far as not perfectly human. Cool. All right, gotta get on. Don't save. Anna, thank you for getting into another challenge. I appreciate it. Yeah, we got lines all over this one, don't we? Let's make a new layer. And if you're wondering why Photoshop is responding so much faster today, it's because I actually brought my main computer here and set it up, and we're not working off of my old computer. Okay, number 1, let's take a look at the comments. I went for the one that I was struggling with most, and hope I can learn from it. I'm struggling a lot with the values, the balance between lost and sharp edges, and the mist. Thank you for your advice. I admire that. Anna, you have several really excellent concepts, and I'm going to suggest, as strong as these images are, make yourself a little series. Seriously, do like 3 of these, and that would work really well, and you've got some excellent pieces to work from as far as the concepts go. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. The values, I think, are the major thing that's getting away from you. So I'm not going to crit on the colors very much. It doesn't even look like you jumped into color variations. You're mainly dealing with values right now. So, yeah, we're not going to deal with that. So let's talk about the values for a bit. One of the first things that I'm going to suggest is... Oh, yeah, I had a values layer turned on there. Turn that on. Is that these are your reference images as far as the art style and the feel, the lighting that you're wanting to go for. But you're not trying to bring that into your image very much. So I'm going to say, okay, we have a good guide right here in your references. So let's try to learn from them as much as we can and figure out how to apply that to your image. Nagutama says, I was wondering if one can still do the challenge, as in using the prompt you made, even not being a Patreon. Yesterday I watched the seed renewal one and got inspired. Is that all right? Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, if you want to follow the prompt and create an image based on these outlines, then absolutely be inspired, go do so. Also, if you want to do it and share it in the Facebook group and get feedback from the other guys and be involved and share it along with the other people sharing their stuff, then do so. You simply cannot get into the challenge and get it reviewed during the stream next time, but yes, you can do it. We have several people that usually do that, and so it can be a lot of fun to be doing it along with some other people and sharing resources and ideas and feedback with each other. Okay, so on these, let's take a look at the lighting of what's going on here, because the lighting is determining a lot of the values that's going on, and then we want to learn from that. On these, it's having the basic scene is fairly dark. So it's really keyed down the ambient light. Then there is one focus light, we might kind of a celestial or angel light, because it's coming down, straight down on them, and it's very bright. So let's pull into these and take a look. This one is particularly nice, done for Legend of the Cryptids, and very clean image. Let's take my notes off of here. So look at that, very low ambient light. What I mean by that is this main light that we see, if you were to remove that and look at the rest of the light in the scene, it's very dark. But this light has very high contrast, and that the things in the light are very bright, to the point where they're beginning to be washed out. Then we're looking at the values. Let's turn on this layer. It's a black and white adjustment layer. So we're neglecting, we're discarding the color for a minute and just talking about the values. Look at the values that she is in. Now, if I were to sample this right along this skin tone and take a look, she's right here. So about 75%, 70 perhaps, I'd say about 70 on 100% black. So she's just over to the medium dark side. And then the highlights are setting it right up there by the upper 10%. And the background is sitting at the latter 90 percentile, or 9 out of 10. And that's what we want to try to bring over into yours. So yours, if we take a look at it, is here. Now if we take a look at yours and we sample this, that would be helpful if I was on this layer. Okay. So if we sample yours, notice that we're much too light. we need to move down 2 stops, 2 values. Then the background, where the background is super dark back here, we're even lighter than the character there. So let's take the values of the background down and then bring the value of the light up. Now I have gone here and copy and pasted each plane of the image from foreground to midground to mid-back to background onto a separate layer, and then we can adjust these a little easier without having to do a lot of selections. So here we go. I'm going to use there's multiple ways you could go about doing this. I'm going to attempt just using a burn tool with highlights. So you see here, now this is a good example because they have a light tone down there at the bottom, and this haze is getting too light for the value, and this whole thing needs to get darker. The lightest stuff and the midtones need to get darker there. Okay. Mid-rock is getting too, I would say probably too, a little too dark. I'll just lighten him up a little bit. Now we can let the midground go a little bit lighter. I'll lower that. Now you'll want to be a little more precise than what I'm doing. I'm just doing this very quick for the stream. Now the idea is that she's in a cave, I think, so we could have some of this a little brighter out here without, I think, hurting too much. I guess I didn't copy that rock at the top. Okay. Then I'm going to use a exposure layer, put it over the character, set that to, I can move it over and you guys can actually see it. That would make more sense. Clipping mask to the character. I can set the exposure up. Reverse that. And then I can just paint in the exposure change. Catherine says, how do you avoid getting perfectionist with the process of making an image? I feel like I need to make 100 studies before I can tackle the thing. That's a good question. Well, how do you avoid getting perfectionist with the process? I feel like I need 100 studies before I can tackle the thing. You might want to have a game plan before you start. And you actually need to limit yourself a little bit. So say I have a day to make a concept, and then you have to commit to it. And that's just you committing to yourself. Unless, there's some outside reason that you can't take longer. But if you were to focus on that, then I think it would help. Say, I'm going to spend today to make a concept, or I'm going to do 5 concepts. And then what I'll usually do is I'll do maybe 6 concepts. I'll pick my favorite one. I'll do 3 variations, pick my favorite one, do 3 variations. And then that's what I go with. And you start having to learn to trust your gut. Because if you're just doing bunches and bunches and bunches of variations, you're not actually trusting yourself. You're just trying to create something by sheer random chance. If I throw enough stuff at the wall, something's going to stick. Usually, putting a frame on it, some sort of constraint, will help. So I'm trying to find something that's similar to that lighting, what's coming down from the top. So that would be closer to what you have going on. Looks like we could probably go... Something like that is going to be closer to your guide and make her stand out a little more. Just bring her lowest value up a little bit. That way she's sitting a little more in the midtones. You can kind of see that difference. We want her to pop a little better. Right now she's not popping out enough. Okay. What was the next point? That has to do, with the lighting. Okay, now this one has to do with the overall design and arrangement of the scene. But that lighting worked with the diffuse lighting guide. Yeah, she would be taking this a different direction, and at this point, I'm okay with that. Some of you guys start veering a little bit, and that's okay. She still has this ominous feeling. It's one of those things that if it was for a publication and I was, making... If I was making an actual product or something, I might be a little more stickler on that. But I think she's got a good idea. She's running with it, and it would serve her image fine. So, artistic license, I'll let her have it. Okay, this one, though, not so much artistic license. This one needs to be right. What we have is an issue with the horizon line and eye level. The main pose was based... No, stop. The main pose was based on this 3D model, which is, I'm fine with that. Cool. Now, the eye level on this, let's turn this off, is about here. We're not really seeing the top of the leg. We're not really seeing the bottom of the leg. So I'm going to guess that the eye level is somewhere in this region. Now, eye level is always what? The horizon line. One and the same. And that brings up a problem because the horizon in this scene is somewhere here. But yet our eye level is here, and they've got to be the same thing. So we're seeing this scene from multiple angles, where we're looking up at her, but we're looking down on this, and they're at the same level. And how do we know that the horizon line is there? Because sea level is always the horizon line. That's a really... sea level is always at the horizon line. And we got the sea right back there. We don't see the top of the sea, but we assume it's, the wave is coming up over sea level. No easy fix here. Well, the easiest fix would be all of this gets removed, then the horizon of the sea gets added right here, then you've got to show... if you want the ship's got to be like here, and you got to have like a wave coming up here. Or you've got to be able to get this model and rotate it so that, or rotate your camera with this model so that the horizon line is equal to about that knee, and the eye level of the camera is equal to about there. So, yeah. Next is, this isn't really fitting for me. it's a really detailed, object that has a repeating high level of visual information in it, and it's actually very eye-grabbing, and it doesn't really need to be. So I'm going to suggest you take that out, and I think once you adjust the lighting that you won't need as much, won't have as much need for it to be there. I'm going to say that way. Now, I don't know what direction you're going to try to handle the lighting here, but let's, like if you have the sky back here, somewhere in that region, then you could even have, you know, that kind of just soft. You can kind of indicate that this is a cave by having, you know, these guys. And some of them can kind of go off into the fog as well. You know, that might help. And you can kind of, you know, push the eye around with those. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't also know that you really need this plane. If you're going to have it, I would suggest having more of a series of rocks going back instead of just big rock, where this distance needs to feel greater. That's a much further distance because that's a big ship back there, but it doesn't feel like we have enough planes. So even if you were to do, you know, that, and you separate that into a plane. And then it's like this is a plane, and then that's a plane. And then the more things that overlap each other going into the background, the further it feels like that goes. Yeah, along that line. Okay. Number 5, the ship. Now on this, you have a very, very foggy scene in the background. Now there's some sort of light, whatever is coming down on her. We don't really need to explain what it is. I just assume there's a light. But on the background, it is very stormy. There isn't really any direct light. It's super foggy and misty. So it's going to be non-directional. And you're not really going to have much as far as light on the top and bottom. You're basically just going to have a silhouette. Without the you know, the top light. So just think about this in terms of silhouette rather than trying to add that extra light up there, unless you're going to have more direct light and really render it out better. So next up, okay, last thing we want to take a look at is a little design here with the cloth. Now, this cloth is not behaving like cloth. This cloth is hugging her, literally folding back to suck up next to the person when it looks like it's not a tailored outfit. This is just cloth wrapped around someone. It is not going to do that. Remember, gravity. The only place cloth like this wants to be is on a pile on the ground, because gravity is always going to be pulling on it. So if this is essentially anchored here because it's being squeezed between the arm and the chest, then we've got an anchor point here, and then I'm going to assume there's an anchor point on the other side where it's wrapped around something. So we're going to kind of say that this is an anchor point. Then it's going to make this. It's going to hang. It's just going to hang between the two. It's never going to fold up. And these aren't realistic ways for that to fold. So in this case, I'm going to suggest go get fabric. Wrap it around somebody. Take a picture. So it needs to be on that line. And think about the pattern of what you want it to do. So it can do this. Maybe you have, it kind of doing that sort of thing. But of course, it's going to be a little more complex than that. Like it's going to have little bits that kind of hold over on itself and part that come out and this sort of thing. It's going to fold back over on itself, and then maybe this is a different piece. So play with that. I think you can get something a lot more interesting out of those folds and the way that it's wrapped around the character. Like you might just have it like here and then have the hand back, the arm back a little bit. So if you want to kind of cover her a little more, you don't necessarily even need to use the fabric. You could just have the arm kind of doing about there, and then have the cloth just covering, other places. So yeah, make sure that you're having some good cloth reference. Again, this looks, it's not as interesting. I mean, it would be more interesting if we could have, like if this was twisting, kind of like that sort of thing. That would be more interesting. Or if it had, like this, that's not that interesting. If it came down here and then it looped over her leg, and then it hung down over there and then looped back off of the foot. That's more interesting. So play with that idea. Anika says, Swatches, maybe this is an out-of-topic question, but I was wondering, do MTG artists really take a whole month to create one piece of artwork? Not usually. We usually have a month between needing to start an image and finish the image, but what we're talking about is you're going to have multiple images to do within that 1 month. So you don't just take one image per cycle, the cycle being that month window. I mean, you could, and I have before, but you usually don't just have one image. So maybe you take on 4 images. Well, yeah, you have a month to do each one, but that basically breaks down you need to do one every week. And they also know that most artists have multiple projects going on at one time. So I will usually have a project that I'm starting, a project that I'm in the middle of, and a project that's being finished about at the same time. So even though I can start working on a magic image, I don't, because I'm still working on the previous project. And it'll be 2 weeks in before I start it. And then I'll start it and I'll send in the sketch. And then I start on another piece, and then that sort of thing. They also give you enough time, because if you have that month window, then what it'll allow you to do is shift things around in your schedule and say, okay, well, I'm going to start this one early and finish it early, and then I'll have a chance to work on this for this other company. Yeah, so that's what's going on there. And how long does it take? I mean, I've had it take from basically a day or two to, well, on the big like advertisement pieces, those take multiple weeks. So yeah, it depends. All right, this one up is by Anna Maria. Anna Maria, thank you for joining the challenge, and I've pulled in some other stuff here. We'll talk through those here in a second. Hopefully that answers your question. Appreciate the question. All right, first up is comment. You said, I wonder, is the entire piece seems a bit blah and boring? Also, I can't work out what's wrong with her face. Have I been too careful with the darkest values, and should there be more of those? Thank you so much for the feedback. Actually, before I get on that, I'm going to say you have some excellent concepts here too. I really like some of these. a lot more complex, but both of these are really interesting, and I could see this being done either way. They both have very different moods to them, and I really like the flow to all of these. Again, this is another one where you have such strong concepts for these that you might think about doing a series. I would hate for some of these to be unused. Okay, value-wise, you're going pretty straightforward values. Simple, foggy scene. I think that's fine. That can work for this. And okay, oh yeah, we're talking about, is it too blah and boring? Yes and no. I think that we could step more into this with some more values, a little more color, but I don't think that this needs to be this kind of bright, impactful, dynamic scene. And it's one of those things where a piece's strength can come from multiple places. And this one, I think, comes from its subtlety. It's harmony of colors, it's harmony of values, and not from what you see from magic images a lot, which is dramatic values, dramatic colors, dramatic poses. And the strength can come from that as well. I usually see the change being between kind of like classic paintings and advertisement, where classic paintings usually relied on a lot of harmony of colors and analogous colors in order to bring the strength to the image, where advertisement is kind of the opposite direction, where it uses contrast of colors and contrast of values in order to create impact. I think you should be with the harmony side. Very similar to what you have over here and even this classic image. So here, very harmonious colors. It's good values. It's good shapes. It's good composition. And so the strength comes from all of those things and not necessarily from the colors. So on yours, we're running a bit to the light side. And what we do want is darker values up front going to lighter values in the back. And that's coming from the foggy atmosphere that you have. And everything is basically going to be that way. Let's try putting in an adjustment layer. I'm going to do, I'm going to select this area. And we will do a levels. And we will push up. We'll push the blacks and the midtones. Then what we will do is use a gradient like this. Oh, give me this. And then I'm going to go inside of there. So that's mainly for the background. The part down here is going to get a lot darker. The dark things in the foreground are going to get a lot darker. As you see on this one, that's very accurate. And then they're going to get lighter as they go back. Now for her, same sort of thing. We weren't getting nearly enough value down here. I don't think you need to go real dark with her, but I would consider going a little bit more. It reminded me of these two images which I had saved. Pull up on those, take a look at them. This one is by Peter Moorbacher, the Angelarium series that he has. Again, very good shapes, very controlled values, very controlled color, and it works. It doesn't need a lot more than that. And yours, I think, could be along that same lines, even very similar color schemes, actually. And this one, too. I'm afraid I don't know who did this. I came across it on Pinterest or something. But very similar thing, very light background and a bit darker here. But even though she is in white fabrics, she's not white. Like we can check and see, I mean, look at the value there. It's right around the midtones. Yep. And, You can do the same thing here. I think you might want to inverse this, where the background is going to be a little more washed out like you have here, and she's a little bit darker. We could try another adjustment here. If we want to do it this way, you don't have to, it's an option. If we were to tone this down, and then I'm trying to basically be the opposite. Okay. So the background would be lighter and she would be a little more shadowed. Not that there was an actual shadow on her, but the ambient light is just brighter in the background and not so much in the foreground. And this is a pretty moody image. So I think that could work. And it keeps, all the same information there. Although, if you want to go to the discordant side, you could definitely do that. So, like vibrance. So, all of this is sitting in the gray blues. And that won't do anything if it's on black. But if you wanted this pop of red hair, I think you could even, push that with a little artistic license. So it's even more so. It wouldn't really be that red, I doubt, because of the color scheme. But it would be interesting to push it further than it need to be so it just really pops out in the scene. And we can make a lighten layer. I'm going to set that. Get that even further back. Now, you do it this way, and it almost feels like everything is just so misty, so wet. All the surfaces are going to be wet. You should have like little gleams, reflections off the rocks. Yeah, you can do it that way. You could even do... Grab me the little color there. Set a darken layer. Now, there is definitely some artistic license in this. This isn't necessarily you would have to do it this way or this is the correct way to do it. If you want to take this a bit of a different direction, that is entirely up to you. And I'm not going to fault you for that. Oh, that's a lighten layer. No wonder it's not doing anything. Okay. Trying to find something that works with that skin tone. So, something like that. Okay, going back to the notes, that was talking about the refs, how to incorporate those. The face, let's pull up, take a look at the face. Turn off all of this stuff. The face is actually really pretty good. I mean, you obviously had a good reference here, and I think you ran right off of that. So let's pull that over there and take a look at it. Now, I don't know if you intended to do something else with the face other than trying to follow this guide. So if you are trying to do something inhuman or change her around a little bit as far as design, then yeah, I don't know where to go. I don't know what direction you're trying to go with it. But as far as making her look humanoid, then I'll try to do that from here. This is all really close. Like if we grab this face and we set that to multiply, and we just overlay it. I mean, you obviously did a lot of measuring or checking or sketching over or something. So it's pretty darn accurate as far as just anatomy. Small changes, just to step it up a little bit. Don't have quite enough over here. Like you set a certain amount of turn to the head, and we're not seeing a complete profile. The nose really tells us how much the head is turned. Let me grab that instead. The nose is really telling us how much the head is turned, which is not completely to the side. But this is treating it almost like a perfect profile, where we should be seeing a bit more of that side over there. And we're also ignoring how that works down here. Now, if we take a look at our reference, we've got that going on. And we've got these shapes going on. Now, we don't really have that over here. We have, it's the philtrum, right, coming down here. Then you have basically the center of the lips at the edge. And we need to move that back so that we have that three-dimensional shape again. Then this is center. It's like you're trying to treat that as center. Now, what that runs into is being able to have a bit of the muzzle shape. There's a whole round barreling from here to here. So this all barrels out as it goes around. And we're getting a bit of that on the backside, and you can see how that works, right? So we need a bit of that barreling on the backside, and that comes into it. So just keep an eye on that center. If there was an imaginary line running down the center there. Let's see, what else? You're changing her eyes a little bit. I think because we're so much lower looking at her pose, you still might have a little bit of an up. I'm not entirely sure. This is one of those I would want to take a photograph or look in a mirror to really figure out how that eye is there. Yeah. Skin tone, you could probably push the skin tone a little more. If we had, let's say, set this to overlay, we might run a little more. Oh, that's way too much overlay. Might run a bit more pink. You can go to the violets a little bit. I'll set it up a little higher than it needs to be so you can see it easier. A little more violet around the eye. And then pinks around most of the nose, except for towards the end of the nose, at the very kind of underneath side, you can get a little bit to the violet side. More of a really warm on the ear, purpley. These are subtle skin tones, but You can also think about the lighting. If you want the lighting to be a little bit more to the cooler side, or it might be a little cyan, you can have that on the planes, coming down. So. You got some there. You got some coming down the arms. That's good. Okay, what else? Notes. Phase 3. Yeah. This is artistic license. Something I would think about is changing up the background a little bit with the clouds. They're not doing much right now. And let me delete that. I think something more interesting. So right now we've got this shape. Whoa. There we go. It had 40% smoothing on it. So this shape of the clouds basically just, again, it's kind of compartmentalizing. It's like there's a little force field around these objects, and the clouds perfectly follow that pattern. And it really shouldn't do that. So if I were to approach it, I'd be thinking something on this line, like you're going to have this curve to the clouds and try to make a flow to it. And think about, can you use the clouds to kind of draw you back up here? One of the ways to think about it is kind of a radiating lines where maybe the clouds are doing, this sort of pattern. And so it pulls you from the left side over to the character. Or like I had on the kind of earlier one, maybe it's doing kind of an S thing so that the big clouds up here are pulling back and it pulls you over to her. But once you get here, it doesn't want to lead you off the page. So it twists back and it leads you back over to the ship. Right? And then you can have kind of this beautiful S or S shape going on with those. That would be pretty cool. Number 4, make sure that you're referencing a ship and getting the rigging. All right, that would really be a good way to get authenticity and bring some believability to the scene, because this all could be very believable. But make sure we're not forgetting like the rigging on the sails, and make sure that those are all accurate. Like these thick ropes on the rigging are visible from a long way. There's some heavy duty stuff. A lot of stuff going on there. So putting those on there would be nice. Maybe you would get to that later, but just in case you might have overlooked it, don't forget to put them in. All right, next up, 4, 5. Okay, LMS, large, medium, small. I think you had it more in your sketch and less in your final. So in some of your concepts here, you have like nice larger shape, and then you have, a collection of medium shapes, and then you get your little shapes. But I feel like those were kind of lost. And now we have, these are fairly boring. It's just kind of, and even the ones in the back end up being about the same size as the foreground ones. So like these two are the same size, not so good. These are super interesting shapes down here in this image. So I'm going to say take a look at these and kind of look at the patterns here. They're not just individual rocks. They came from sort of a strata, right? They have an angle to them. So you can look at the shapes of these rocks. Now this is a big shape. And it has a medium shape in it. And then you have medium shapes, and then you have smaller shapes, and you're subdividing these, but they also have kind of a flow to them, right? They have this angle to the breaks, angles to the rocks, and these all follow this pattern. Then it's the little ones that break up, that fall into the water, and they're more random. they've been tossed around a bit more. Okay. And so here, I think that could be applied back here. This rock shape is even more interesting. This one's fairly boring. See if you can get some good shapes out of that. Maybe you can create, some sort of, idea that these are falling into the ocean. Then we can have some different medium, small shapes back here. And then we might want to have like a bigger rock here. Then you have your medium rocks and then your smaller rocks. And try to vary it up a little bit. AOL Movies says, will you open dates for the private tutoring? Yes, I will. That's more of something I've just forgot to do. I appreciate the reminder. Someone even emailed me recently about that, and I, again, totally forgot to go out there. But yes, if you want to have a one-on-one video consultation with me, then you can go to art-mentor.com, and when I go out there and actually open the dates, then you can schedule one with me. Karawas says, where do people get the 3D human model references from? Yeah, there's a couple of different sites. Daz is one. Poser is another. I think those two are probably your biggest ones. So Daz, D-A-Z, and Poser, exactly how you think you would say it, or spell it. Or just use your camera and take a photo of a friend or yourself in a mirror. Those work also. Notes. The other thing here is there's nothing inhuman about her. I'm not going to say that's a problem, but you could consider trying to give her some small inhuman traits. I was thinking like if, as it went down her leg, she started having scales. And it's nothing real abrupt. There's not like spikes coming off of her leg, but maybe she has skin-colored scales. So at the beginning, you look at it and you're like, oh, wait a minute. She actually has flesh-colored scales. And that could be a little interesting. Or maybe adding some seaweed or little stuff caught in her hair. Or that her hair is normal red hair color, but it's actually in the shape of seaweed. Like the form of it is seaweed, but it has normal hair color instead of green seaweed color. That kind of direction. So just play around with that, see if something hits you. If not, then, your call. So, that's it for that piece. Thank you for sending it in. Hopefully you find that helpful. Okay, this one is by Bas DeVries. I'm sure I butchered that, but hopefully you forgive me. All right, first up is taking a look at the notes. You say, I also have a question about thumbnailing. Oh, you said the idea for my enchantment room is basically the back room from a magic store that sells enchanter potion stuff to adventurers. Okay, that makes sense. I'm good with that. I also have a question about thumbnailing, about where in the painting process would you add a perspective grid? Now, a perspective grid, if you're unfamiliar with it, is this sort of thing. Now, it can be something that you go out and download, like I did here. I pulled this off of Google's. And you could also make it yourself, which might be more applicable to what you're doing. But, yeah. These are some other references, too, that I found that were kind of cool. This is a drawing of a mer person from Harry Potter, I believe was the design, or at least inspiration. That was a good kind of humanoid, but obviously not human. This was another cool lighting by Kyle Anderson. I could see some of the images going that direction as well. This sort of thing. Brahm. Again, Brahm. Several pieces by Brahm are kind of that direction. Of course, this is one of the images I originally gave out as an idea for the lighting. And just kind of the pose, cloth, that sort of thing. Somebody in all white. Another Brahm image. This one, the character of Drin, yeah, from the movie Splice. She's half human, half like genetic mutation. I forgot what it was, but where it's humanoid, but obviously not human. Like nobody has eye placement like that. So, you know, something that direction if you want to think about pushing in it to the inhuman side. So for this image, where would you do it? Well, I would probably do my thumbnails and just bash out the idea of what I have in mind. But once I choose which idea I'm going to go with, I am going to start sketching it up and put in my perspective guides. That is the time to do it. The time right now is to do a more detailed drawing of this scene and make sure everything is accurate and you know what everything is. Then you need to go into actually painting it and coloring it and all that. Particularly because your reference images here are very detailed, they're very clean, and somebody went through and did a very nice clean line drawing of both of these before they started painting them. And I'm going to suggest you do the same thing because you're trying to go that direction. For your grid, you're going to end up with something like this. Now, I used that other grid and I skewed it because I didn't need as much vertical change to it. And that would, you know, main thing you need to know is where is your horizon line, which is this one, which is flat. And then where do the things line up? All right. Now, this one doesn't fall on one of these green lines. It falls, you know, towards the middle of one of them. But that would give you the idea for that. Now, it doesn't look like this room is necessarily having all the stuff sitting at the same angle. Otherwise, like the top of this room, the top of that wall needs to be doing this, you know, following this perspective guide. This is also a really tight perspective. So if you didn't want this dramatic of an angle, then this guide would need to be, you know, stretched out. And the further you stretch it out, the less angle you would get. You're drawing out the angle. And the thing that would determine that is basically what kind of lens are you looking at this scene from. It doesn't look like you're looking at it from a very fisheye lens. A real wide, you know, like, I mean, a really squeezed in a bunch of stuff. So I'm feeling like it's more like this, which is a fairly normal lens, almost like a telephoto that you've kind of zoomed into the scene. But what you can do is start by just doing a bunch of horizontal lines, and then these are set to linear dodge. Then you can skew them. So you can just transform it. And be like, well, I'm looking at the back wall there. I'm not trying to meet this. Whatever it is, one of these lines has to meet the horizon line. So something like that might, like, okay, that works. That would mean that the wall is in accordance with the horizon line. But if you want all of these to work together, like if you want the table and the wall to be together, then what I can do is manipulate this. Oh, wrong button. I'm going to drag this until one of these lines meets that edge of the table. I'm going to say the edge of the table is fixed. Now I want to pull this down. right about there. So that would be the angle the wall would need to be in order to match up with the table if they were at the same angle. But in this scene, it looks like the wall is kind of flat to us, and then the table is set at an angle. So you have to work that out. Okay, moving on to other stuff. Notes. Number 2. A big thing here with the design of the scene is there is no focal point. And that's an issue. You've got to think about what that's going to be. There's nothing big enough to say I'm the focal point. There's nothing bright enough, dark enough, complex enough, anything to just say this is what this scene is about. Now, even on these other scenes, they have a focal point. This is the focal point of that scene. There's a bunch of other stuff, but that is clearly it. This and this are the focal point of this scene. This one's a little split because all of these perspective lines point you out here, making that a focal point, but the brightest lights are over here illuminating this area. So yeah, it's kind of divided on that one. Here, what is it going to be? Naturally, it feels like it's going to be this because it's in the middle of the image, but I don't think that should be it. I don't think your focal point should be that thing in the background when you have all this stuff in front of you. This should probably be your focal point. So I'm going to suggest this being made bigger. Like you can have, some sort of magic orb, glass or stone, whatever it is. You figure out what it is, but make it a little bigger. If it was this, it doesn't even have to be centered, but it can just be about that big, and then it gives us a focal point. Take this out so it's not trying to compete. Let us know that that's not a thing. Or if you have it, then stick it down here out of the way. Okay, going on from there. 3. This space back here. In order to convey that this is a store and also just make better use of your overall space, I'm going to suggest changing up the background a little bit. Like, that looks like there's some sort of desk or something. Just run that up. Run that up higher. Then if you have a bunch of drawers, like store drawers like this, each one has like a little handle. That feels more like something that a shop would have in the back. Right? And they've got stocks of stuff. Or they've got stacks of things. Stacks of products on top of each other, big stacks. Those are sort of interesting, and it fills the room better. It helps tell the narrative a little bit. More posters, writing on the wall. Let's try to give it a bit more. 4, you got to think about what the color scheme is going to be here. It looks like you hadn't got to that point yet. Anything like this, I think, would work fine as well. Basically, warm light source and cooler stuff in the shadow. Kind of a warm, cool thing going on with light and shadow. Don't necessarily need to go fancier than that unless you have some reason to. Okay. Number 5 is this doorway is sort of problematic because it's so bright and it's such an obvious shape. It's a very clear rectangle that's super bright, and we want to change that. We might have this room more illuminated than that room. Like this is shadowed more than this, so it doesn't just pull us completely out of this room. Rule of thumb is you put the light on the focal point. And if you want somebody to look somewhere, put a light on it. We don't necessarily need to look out here. We just need to know it's a doorway. Unless you need to put something there that is important. I am also going to suggest you try to do something with it. Maybe there's some portraits on the wall or some visual information there. Okay, question says, Swatches, how do you determine the horizon line? Pretty basic, I know, but I get so confused. Well, you can find the horizon line where things converge. Let's take a look at this. I've got a fly buzzing me around. Okay. So here, wherever things come down to, this is coming down, this is coming up, these coming together, these are coming together. So if you get two parallel things, that's a little fat. Let me make that go down. We will use the floorboards. I'm making a line following the floorboards. And this rug, since it's following the floorboards. Wherever these two parallel lines end up converging, that's the horizon line. And the horizon line is also your eye level. So if you were standing in this room, that's how tall your eyes are from the ground. If you were back there against that wall, your eyes would be just as tall as that is, and the top of your head would be there. If you were standing over here, your feet would be here, and your eyes would be right there. Top of your head would be above that. So you can figure out that. Essentially, anything over the horizon line, you're looking up at. I'm looking up at all these. I'll look at the underside of this shape. Let's consider this a cube. Or cuboid. It's not a perfect cube. Oh, you're really not picking up my keys, are you? So we're looking at the bottom side of that, but yet we have another cube down here. We're looking at the top of this because the horizon line is here. So anything under the horizon line, you're looking on the top of it. Anything over the horizon line, you will be looking at the bottom of it, unless it's like, turned upside down or something. So. And on his, same sort of thing, like where does this line go off to? And it looks like I can barely see the top of this thing. So it's got to be a little above that. And these are coming down. This is coming down just a little bit. These are barely coming up. So, yep, his horizon line is right in this area. And then everything needs to match that. I think that was it. Talking about that in space, yeah. We don't have any color to talk about, really, since you didn't do any studies of that. I think the value scheme needs to be something like you have here, which is maybe you just have a light, unseen light, from a lamp or something up here, shining down on this, and essentially this part of the scene can probably be kind of shadowed, with the exception of one of your little lights back here. And he's lightening some of that stuff up. But yeah, you've got a light, back here, and you might even have, some more shadow backing on the top areas. Just, getting a little darker as it kind of goes away to the background. But something like that. You could also have it falling off into shadow. This is just kind of how I pictured it based on your scene. You might have a completely different idea in mind, but I was kind of picturing that sort of thing going on. Yeah. Well, I need to hurry up, man. It's almost 9 o'clock already. Wow. Okay, I see we got some questions, but it looks like I really need to move faster. This one is by Constanza. Constanza, thank you for joining in, and I appreciate doing something a little different style-wise. It's always fun to see something a little bit different. We get a lot of the same stuff, which I don't have any problem with. The basically, fantasy realism. But this is super stylized, and it's very cool to see. So time caught up with me, but I'm uploading what I have so far. I'm not so sure about the colors. Please send help. All right, well, we will do what we can. All right, give me this guy. All right, cool. Just take off the notes. So that's what we have. Pretty neat scene. Siren up on top of this cliff. And we got very, very dynamic shapes, obviously very stylized. I'm not going to try to move you away from that. I think that's working really well for you, and let's try to keep going with it. But if we're going to do it that way, a couple of ideas that might get more out of it. Number one, just saying what I said, which is I like the style. Let's try to get more. Number two is this down here. Now, I like the idea, but I think the execution, not as much. That you've got basically a crack, a little hollow in this rock, and there's some bones in there, and you got some bones in this little crevice too. And that's cool. But we've got this vertical line going on where this is coming here, and then we've got this into this, into this, into this. And it's all like right down the middle of the scene. And it's too perfect. It's kind of like what do you call it? Like kissing lines. Yeah. So, main thing is, if you're going to do that, let's try to do it where maybe the crack is more like that. So at least it's not this all centered line. It kind of follows a pattern like this. So it's at a tilt, right? And it doesn't have an immediate read of like a perfect little circle on the bottom of it. So smallish change there. But I think it would help with their overall composition. Number 3S. The pose with the character. If you're going so stylized, I think you could probably get more out of the character's flow. Character right now basically is kind of a straight line. And I feel like you're trying to go for something very feminine or alluring, except that's not really an alluring pose. Something that's very common is S-curves, being kind of sensual. So here, I mean, you got a couple of options, like if you had her kind of reclining, had like this, and maybe she had one of her legs up and the other leg out, so she was doing that sort of thing. That would be more of like an S-curve going on like that. You can think about that. You can try to go the other way. If her chest was out further. I don't know how you do it with her leg there, but yeah. Or if you could have, maybe even keep her body similar to that. I'm not sure what's going on with the leg there. Think about what's the anatomy is going on there, because I'm not even sure what's going on with the anatomy. But she's kind of reclining here. And you could have the dress doing some sort of cool thing where it's like, going around her into like a S kind of curve. Let's see, number 4. That's one of those times I would want to sketch out for a while and try to come up with something. Don't have an immediate answer on that. Number 4 is this overall shape of the rock. Stylized. I like the idea of the stylized, but I think there's probably a better way to do it. This is a very straightforward way to do it. Basically what we have is frame, triangle rock, person on rock. Yeah, but what if it was this? I mean, it's got a little more flow. It's got a little more imbalance. What if the rock was like this and it was bigger on the top and smaller on the bottom? What if it was a series of rocks that kind of had a fan shape? And like we saw in that other photo, they broke. So there's cracks in the rock, and they're kind of doing this sort of thing. So each one of these would have, whoops, wrong way to do it. Each one of these would have a bit more of a design to how the rock's shape and the overall flow in the image. So you've got this nice flow here, but if the rocks did, that could be kind of interesting. Or if the rock did this and it was just this overhang, and then you kind of had the crack under the overhang there, then now you're starting to establish this really strong horizontal dynamic in the scene. And that's sort of interesting. Then you could have the wave playing off of that dynamic. So you have this flow, and then this rock sort of mimics that same shape with this. And then you have this dress kind of coming down, and then you have the crack in the rock here with stuff in it. And then you could have the wave basically running that direction to it, where the waves are all trying to go this angle. And then you could have the clouds kind of going that opposite angle. So the whole thing is having this X pattern to the dynamics of the angles. Okay. Okay. Shapes. We're highly stylizing things. And we're using this beautiful sort of S-curve flag shape here. And then we could consider using different kinds of shapes for different parts of the objects, the different subjects. So for her, it could be like an S shape. For the rocks, to make them feel kind of harder, you might use more cube-like shapes, not so elegant curves, but more straights. And then for the water, this feels too much like the rock. So what you want to do is use a different shape for that, which is very curved. I'm almost thinking you can get something near that classic Japanese painting with the all the spirally curved waves coming up. And that sort of thing. So each one of them has a very distinct shape language to it, and that would be pretty cool if you want to go that way. Otherwise, you can give them all very similar. I would say either make them all very similar or make them all have their own kind of family. Color-wise, I'm thinking probably analogous. I don't think you need to get real fancy. Like, even if you just use colors kind of like this, I think that would be fine. Just keep it in the bluish tones. I need to open something, but I need to get this off screen for a second. Okay, let's see, palette selector. So like this is the palette selector here, and analogous, of course, is if we get the palette and then we only use a portion of it, we're only using these colors, then you can kind of think about which range of colors you want to use. I feel like yours is probably somewhere in this range, like from the green to the violet, based around the blues somewhere. Or if you want to have a little extra color to it, then you could have like a discordant, which is basically analogous, kind of still running that cool color, but you have some offset color, like the orange. So maybe she has orange hair or an orange dress, or there's orange light in the background, but the rest of it has a very similar color. Yeah, I don't think you need to get into like really realistic lighting, not for something this stylized. So, yeah. All right, that's that for for that image. Of course, that was a terrible way to say it, but all right, where are my concepts? Yes. All right, need to keep going. Oh, yeah, I really need to move. This is by Gatto. I don't know how to say that. Tomas. You say, this is my first challenge? Well, welcome. I appreciate you jumping in the challenge. I'm new to digital, and it became clear to me that I need to adjust my values and colors better. I think that was a good observation. You're right on point with that. And I also would like to know if I need better brushes or if I can get a good level with my brushes by default. I use Clip Studio. I reckon the defaults are probably fine. Brushes are rarely the thing that will make or break an image. So yeah, if you have the choice between putting time into the values and colors and composition, that sort of thing, rather than looking for new brushes, that's probably a wise choice. Number 3, which one of your courses would you recommend to start with? If you were to pick up some of my materials, where to start with would be my free stuff. And that would be the Art Fundamental series on YouTube. Make sure you watch those. I think I have 5 of them right now. So go watch the Art Fundamental playlist on the YouTube channel. And then watch the references episode. That's another big one. And then if you want to pick up some of my purchasable stuff, I think for what you're doing with this, the painting process would actually be very useful. And it'd give you a good idea of how to go about doing this whole thing. So painting process, colors and values and lighting, those ebooks are all applicable to about anything. And if you want to see an example of me doing an image and kind of talking through the process, looking at like making Nissa, making Liliana, either one of those are probably good. Okay, number 4. This has to do mainly with the use of the space, and that is everything that this scene is about is in this frame. Nothing out here adds to this. So we need to rework the composition because really what we could do is just that. And then it's, what can I do with this? The rest of it, why does it even matter? It's not helping us enough to warrant it. Now, either we need to really crop in and do that sort of thing, or we need to get this to do more. Now, I am going to say that this needs to be reposed some because we do have the main subject way up here in the corner. Right? If anything, let's try to put her on some thirds. All right, keeps giving me that. So we divide this into thirds, and then divide it into thirds this way. Guess I could actually just use this. Oh, good. Stop doing that. Then the best place to put her close to where she is would be about there. So we need to move her down so she's taking up more of that area than up here. And if we can get her, this area right here to right there, that would be better. But then we also need to really make sure this stuff is doing something for us. Because right now, these aren't making good shapes. Oops, alarm. A lot of this is pretty boring. And this is a very simple way to do it. So I'm wondering, like, why isn't she more front and center? Like this is more interesting. Like, we get to see this wrapping around. We get to see these big fins on it. This doesn't seem as interesting. It's just kind of like a really standard kind of tube. So 5 is pose composition. And what can you do different with it? Well, here's an image by, values? Yeah. Oh, we'll come back and talk about it. This is an image by Jesper. Now, Jesper is an MTG artist. And his last name is this, Ajin. I don't know if that's how you say it or not. I never asked him how to say that. So this is like a snaky dragon thing that he designed. And look how much rhythm and how interesting this shape is. Boom, this comes out this way. And then it loops back around. And then it comes this way. And it loops back over itself. And it comes this way. And then it has this little kinky thing, turn right there. And then it comes up here. And so there's so much life to this thing. And yours could get a bit more of that. So if yours was, let's turn that off. If it was coming here and then around like this, and then you can see it, give some contour lines there. And if it's doing that, then it's coming up and around, maybe, it's coming out from maybe behind itself. So it's coming up and around. But if it goes behind the rock, it doesn't just snug the rock. Maybe it comes up here like this. So the rock comes down there like that. Then with her here, it comes like this. So it's kind of like space right there. And then she's overlapping the rock more. So we can set her back a bit. You can see how that has a much more interesting flow to it. And you would want to go through several different patterns in order to find which one works best. Here's some other ones. These are both by Jesper. Like this. Coming foreground. Pulling around that. Then coming up out of the fire on this side. And then pulling, overlapping itself like this. So this is good. Those are good curves. Same thing up here. You look at this. This is really nice coming up and around this thing, making use of a lot of that space. And that's what we want to do. We want to use dynamic poses, dynamic curves in order to make use of that space. And if we're going to put it there, then let's try to get a bit more out of it. I am going to suggest, it doesn't look like she's laying on it at all. So we want to make sure that she's actually reclining onto the rock. Right? And we want her coming up here. We got to come around and then back to the front of the rock. Right? And then she's got to come where this is now overlapping that. Okay, number 6. Oh, I got 2 6s. Another one with the cloth here, that cloth won't behave this way. That this is just a free-floating cloth, and it's basically suctioned onto the person. Now, maybe if it was wet and she was wet and you could get it to kind of stick on there, but I don't really buy it. So can we find a way to drape this that would follow natural cloth behaviors and do the job that you want? But my other thing is, for your version of the character, you might deal away with the cloth, and yeah, you give her like a fantasy creature breast, which is like they don't have nipples, they don't have a lot of definition. That she's got, kind of like that, but maybe even less, where, you just kind of have like the shape a little bit, but it's subtle. And it's the idea that you can tell it's female, but it doesn't have necessarily human detail anatomy, right? Because she's obviously very fish in your version. So what I'm thinking is that she has more fish scales and attributes, and it's just vaguely humanoid in its form, kind of like a mannequin, right? Hopefully that conveys. In which case, if you're not going to have overt human, anatomy, then you don't really need the cloth if you're going that direction, so consider that. Okay, anything else? The background really isn't doing anything. Like, you have this really cool image here that you came across. So if you want to go that direction, that could be really cool. I'm going to add some more of that stuff in the background. Add the, all the ship sails and shipwrecks and stuff. Otherwise, we need something more interesting with the sky, and this feels really flat. All of these values are the same in the same saturation of colors all the way from sky to horizon into the foreground. So we need some gradation, some change. And the idea is, like, if you start adding ships and stuff, then it gives us a better sense of depth. So there we go. Hopefully you find that helpful, and I look forward to seeing where you take it. Awa says, Swatches, in case you missed the question, do you already know when you will send out the Patreon critiques? Anna here. I don't have a set date. Actually, that's a good reminder. I really should do that. I'll send out what I have next week. Whoever's sent something in, I'll send it out next week. That's a good reminder. I'll just make sure it gets done. Okay. This one is in by Jaroslav. Thank you for joining in. Hey, Clint, thanks for the critique. Okay, so not really much in the comments. Number one, I just want to make sure that I'll take a look at this. This is the 3D mock-up, a model arrangement that he created in order to, figure out his scene. So that's really well done. I like the sort of haphazard, realistic arrangement of stuff, that some of the drawers are open, some of the stuff has fallen over. It's a little chaotic. It's not too, not too perfect. It feels like what you'd kind of expect it should be. So good job on that. I don't know what you used to model it up, but looks good. So now we start talking about the aesthetics a little bit, because obviously the perspective is right. He used a 3D model program. All the perspective is very accurate. So I'm not going to critique any of that. So a couple of things that I see, I really want to just go forwards a little bit, not 200%. Yeah, right about there. Okay, good. So a couple of things that I see is the chair. I'm not loving the shape that this makes, that you just have this kind of big block here, and that this chair kind of fits perfectly in there, and that the chair is pushed all the way up to the desk. I would probably pull the chair back so that it's not just perfect. It might even be at a bit of an angle, like he didn't leave it perfectly set, like he kind of pushed it back and got out of it, and then it's just maybe a little closer at one side than the other side, or maybe it's turned, Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, probably like that. Like turn a different angle. And so you got that kind of going behind it, that sort of direction. Yeah, let's see. Next up was 3. Yeah, this book, I like the idea of the book, but it's too perfect to us. And it wants to be the focal point. And I don't think you want it to be the focal point. So it's a very perfect rectangle right in the middle of the scene, and the whole thing is very light, which are multiple things trying to give it the strength of a focal point. So let's try to adjust it. You might need to go back and play with this a little bit so that even if this was kind of like this, but then it changed angles right here, and there was something behind it, keeping that from opening completely, then that would help because it would stop it from being a perfect rectangle. You could do it that way. Also, if you had a couple of the pages that were kind of open, so it's not perfectly flat, some of the pages are kind of, stuck open like this, then that would also break that shape up a little bit. So a couple of ways to arrange that and handle that little thing. Number 4. Number 4 is this is your focal point by all accounts that I figure. And I think it's a little small. I'm going to suggest that we scale that guy up a little bit. He doesn't need to be massive, but if he is going to be the focal point, then let's bring him up a little bit more, right? Just so that it's nice and clear that he's what we're looking at. And also allow you to get more detail into the focal point. Number 5, I'm a little confused as to the snake. Because I'm not sure if it's supposed to be real or not. And even if it is or isn't, I don't know that you necessarily need it there. Any living thing in this scene is going to grab attention. And I guess it feels super random. Like, of all of these mugs and jars and books and stuff, there was just this green snake. And I don't really make any sense about why it's there. I can't find the connection of why. If there was a broken jar and he's like slithering out of the jar, that's something. If there was snake designs on this thing, then that's something. But right now, he's like not connected to anything. I'm going to suggest you take him out. And anyway, that's my 2 cents. Okay, number 6. I like your lighting here. I like your little studies. I think that's on the right line. But I also think that it could serve you well to have a little second light that's not very strong. And say that there's something over here that's kind of bluish. And it just might be catching the sides. These have like little planar edges on them. Might be just catching some of these little bottles. So you just have, instead of having it get so much darker. Oh yeah, I did a variation of yours. Sorry, I forgot to even say that. This is yours, but I pushed the values a bit more because there wasn't really a lot of darks. And I think that makes the light feel better. I forgot to even say that. But yeah, I adjusted that. But then if you do that, you can still let this go into shadow, but essentially you're going to shadow, but you're shifting it into the the cool side more. And you can have this little cool light over on this side. That's just catching up a few things. Yeah. Kind of that direction with it. It's a little cool light. Number 7, again, personal preference, but think about maybe having some luminescent items. Like maybe this jar has a little luminescent something in it. And it's just casting a little light up there. Like some little green flame or something in it. Now, if you have that, I mean, that would just throw a little extra color somewhere. You might have like another, potion bottle or something that has a similar thing down here where you just got like this one little glowing kind of jar, a bottle, kind of back in there. So yeah, consider doing it that direction. If you want to add some extra lights, then you can do it by having jars or crystals or that sort of thing. Let's see, 6. I do like a lot of your references here. This is very nice. Hopefully you do something like that with this big pot. These sorts of things in here, that's excellent. Beautiful wood you got there. This is really good. If you can do this sort of thing, that's awesome. One thing don't forget is, adding like patina and aging. Add scuff marks, add dust, add a little grind layer on top of stuff, and that's really going to make it sell more realistically. So no big changes here, just some little tweaks and suggestions about what to do with it. So look forward to seeing the final on this one. Really am. Matt Bean, you probably know what I'm going to say first. Where's the template, man? I'd really like you to submit your image with the template as requested. I mentioned it in the video last week. I mentioned it in the outline of the challenge. I supplied the PSD file, and I have a video instructing how to use it. And it's not just I'm trying to be hard on you, but honestly, I will be able to do a better job of helping you and making this worth your while if you follow the template and you send in the reference images and you send in the sketch and you send in the studies. Because the more information I have like that, the more I'm going to be able to help point you in the right directions and make the right suggestions. So right now, I'm going to be a little limited about what I can do since I don't have that to fall on. Okay, so number 2. Number 2 is kind of what we get, which is I don't know everything that I'm looking at in this image. I don't know what some of this is. I have no idea what this is. I don't know what this is. I think these are bottles, maybe. So, I'm not going to be able to say much as far as what to do with them or how to fix them. My thing would be make sure it's really clear. It looks like one that you probably want to do a good, accurate line drawing first, even if you don't keep the lines to the end of the painting. Let's make sure that you know what everything is, and everything is properly drawn in the right perspective. And then once that's taken care of, do your value studies, do your color studies, and then move on. But don't move on until you know everything's accurate. Okay, number 3. I'm going to say take these out. Those look like the plier things that dentists use to pull teeth. And which isn't bad in itself, but one, it doesn't make any sense why it's there. Unless you have like a bunch of skulls with teeth missing in a pile of teeth, then it'd be like, okay, there's, a narrative going on about what he's doing. And then also, it's just the idea that it is a very dark, sharp object on a very light page. So it is the highest contrast, semi-symmetrical shape, and it wants to be the focal point. And I really don't think it should be. If you're going to have a focal point, this book is fine. The book can be the focal point. So let's take those away. Number 4, USP. Now, USP in business is unique selling point. What is the unique selling point? What is the thing that you're trying to sell to people that's unique about your product? And this way we're saying the book is the focal point, but what is the unique selling point about this book? What is so interesting that now that I'm looking at it, I want to actually look at it? I don't know. You've got a lot of options. So maybe this book has text that floats off of it, and then it has little shadows under the text. It has like floating text in it. Okay. Oh, wrong button again. Fine, I'll do it this way. Different keyboard. Like I said, I keep hitting the wrong key. It's not where it normally is. Or maybe it has like a 3-dimensional world that comes out of this book. I mean, that would be cool. Like it's part drawing, and then the drawing changes into being an actual castle with, trees and stuff. It's like a magical pop-up book. Okay, that's cool. Or maybe it's a book that's, even if it was just kind of open, where you have multiple pages. Now you can think of it kind of like a curve. Like if this was opening up, you're going to have this sort of thing going on. The pages are going to be doing that, right? That's the guide. And then we can just follow. Easier if I did that way. Follow that angle. Now, if the pages were kind of like magically, flipping through, and you could see arcane symbols, and I guess that one would not go that direction. That one would go back this way. If it was this, and then you had like light coming out of it. Now that's cool, right? So figure out what it is that is unique or interesting about this book and run with that. All right, next up, number 4. Oh, that's supposed to be 5 and 6. I got 2 4s. 5 here is just the size of the skull. It seems a little small. So if that is a human skull, this is a freaking massive book. Like, that's 1 head, 2 heads. I mean, this book is huge. I think the skull probably needs to be bigger. And make sure that you have a proper skull. People are very familiar with what skulls look like and what the anatomy of a skull should look like. So make sure that you're looking at a skull. There are 3D, there are sites where you can go buy 3D models. I forget the name of it, the one that I looked at recently. But you can go out there and you can often pull up the 3D model in the web browser and move it around. So just go out to one of the 3D model sites where you can buy the 3D models, search for a skull, and then find one that's in the right, and then you can orient it the way you want, and then take a screen capture of it or sketch it from that right there. Okay, doing that. Number 5, we just have this edge here where these guys are coming right down to the edge of the frame. So either this needs to, the frame needs to go back, so there's a buffer between that, and it doesn't look like he's sitting on the edge, or it needs to be like open more so it can just go back behind it, one or the other. So there we go. That's what we got on that one, Matt. Of course, if you want more feedback, maybe not necessarily from me, I can't always feedback on people on the Facebook group, but if you do some more work, toss it up on the Facebook group and see what people have to say. This one is by Nicolas. Nicolas, thank you for joining in another challenge. Clint, I took the liberty to change the format of the picture as nothing was specified in the brief. It has to be a portrait or a landscape orientation. I hope it's okay. It's absolutely okay. It's one of those things I just simply forgot to say, that you can definitely use horizontal or vertical, square, whatever you want. And yeah, please feel free. But I want to see all the same information. I want to see your major references, your value studies, your color studies. Okay, you said, again, that's too much. Split the difference there, computer. There we go. Really, really indecisive about which light scenario to take on. I tried this one, but I'd love to hear your insights, thoughts. Yep. So 2, 2, and 3, basically start looking at the same thing. Let's zoom in here. People can take a look at this. So this is a really neat idea. I'm not sure, like crystals and a sword and a book. I mean, that's pretty cool. This one is reading well. These are all reading well. That one's probably getting a little bit too broad for what's going on, but it's a really cool scene. So, yeah. I'm with you that I think these two are probably better than that one. It's just overall putting too much emphasis on the candles and not so much on the rest of the scene. This one has a very, I wouldn't say it's less magical, but it's kind of more relatable. It just feels like everyone has walked into a room that had a light off with some light streaming through a window over a table or something. It's just such an ordinary thing that it's kind of interesting because it's like this magical place with this very ordinary way to look at it. But if you're wanting to go for the more magical, the bit more mysterious, then I think you're right on the right track. So this is very cool. I'm with you that the normal really warm lighting, nothing wrong with it, but I think the green or the blue has a bit more of a magical edge to it. So I'm fine with those. I think if you're going to go with this lighting, that you would go with the warm colors, just this very welcoming, kind of relatable, warm afternoon light coming in through the window. But these all work. Pixel Studio says, how do you get your work critiqued by Swatches? I'm first coming to his live streams. Pixel, what you want to do in order to get your stuff reviewed like you see right now is you will need to buy a ticket for the next art challenge. And that will be kicking off in 2 weeks. We have not yet determined what the subject of that will be, but we will put a poll out on the Facebook group, and then I will put the tickets for sale out on my Gumroad store, probably. I'll let you know. And there are only 12 of them. They will probably go up on that Saturday. And they are, the last one's at $15, so it'll be right in that range. And then the ticket essentially has a document letting you, where you can go download the template for putting your image in it. It has the information for the uploading folder, and that's the main thing you're buying is you have the link to the upload folder where I go, get stuff to review it. Okay, now on this scene, there's nothing inherently wrong about this, but it's also one where I don't actually know what a lot of this stuff is. You've done a really good job of alluding to things without actually painting them. So I can't really critique and say, well, that really needs to be this way or that way because I don't know what it is. The overall feeling feels very good. But some ideas. Number 3, we talked about the lighting. Oh, I think we had a number 2 here. Oh, this one, as far as lighting, it reminded me of this scene, which I believe it was for Magic. I think it was a Magic card. And this is kind of cool where, again, instead of getting dark, he shifted the background to being very blue. And the foreground elements, which are almost all brass, are very warm. And so it keeps a very clear background-foreground dynamic without having to resort to heavy values. You might think about that with like the background behind the desk becoming more blue or more violet or some, that lines. And then separating kind of the midground, foreground, background with the color tones like that. That's what was going on there. Number 4, that was my normal layer. Okay. I'm not sure what this is. When I glanced at it, I thought it might be like curtains. Like this was usually a doorway that was curtained off. And it's almost like we're getting to have a little peek into this room that's normally closed. And so he's got, the ties that there's a fabric tie there that usually pulls it, tighter. And so it kind of does that sort of thing. And you would need to look what those look like if you want to do it that. But that was just one idea. I was going to toss that out there. And it would give it a little bit of narrative. It would kind of set the setting and be like, oh, we're getting a peek inside of the Enchanter shop, Number 5, some reference pictures here. As far as just some stuff to populate your scene with, I remembered some glass things that I had come across. And they seem pretty cool, and they might fit with yours. So like this, it is, a dark background like what you have. And then there is a glass dome, and the light is coming through this. But because there's atmosphere in this, or because the glass is not perfectly clear, it's a little scuffed up, it's going to catch the light. And then you get these nice little, basically, bottles of light. And, that could be, this sort of thing back here or back on the shelf. That could be pretty cool. And in order just to add some color into stuff. Now, this one was the idea of what if you had colored glass with some sort of light either in it or even hitting it. And it would give you a very similar effect. And you could still make out a little bit about what's inside of it. Specimen jars, also, some sort of little specimen inside of these things. That would work. Okay, next up, 5, 6. Here, we don't want to forget about perspective. As much as going on in here, I don't feel like that has proper perspective. I feel like there's probably some things over here that doesn't have proper perspective. So make sure, sorry, my nose is really itching. Something's bothering it. So it looks like our eye level is right about here. And we want to make sure that we're running the perspective lines. So even at the benefit of the doubt, if it's up here, then this table, we need to make sure like the outsides of the table are following that right perspective. And then this thing needs to be following that same perspective. But also consider trying to add some things at an angle, because everything right now is flat. This desk is completely flat. Flat to us. So if you were to take a top view of this scene, have it a little smaller. There we go. So if we took a top view of this scene, we'd have the camera here. And our field of view would be like this. It would be going out like that. And then we would have the desk right about here. Then we have the chair, and it's straight. And then we have this big thing in the background, the cabinet, like this. And then we have the wall. And then we have this thing sitting in front of it. And this thing sitting next to it. And these are all flat to us. Our vision is going this direction, and everything is sideways, 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 sideways. It doesn't build much depth, and it doesn't draw you into the image that way. Whereas, imagine if you had your camera here in your field of view, and then if the desk was like this, and this item was like this, and we had an item like this, you could see that, maybe the wall back here. I'm not saying this is what you want to do, I'm just giving an example. That these would lead you into the background. So instead of flat, 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 we'd have this pattern drawing you back in, right? Something like that line. So without changing a lot, like the desk can be flat to us, okay, but what if the chair was slightly turned? Probably turned this way, since it's on the left side. So kind of idea of it's turned like that. Maybe we see, the arms kind of coming up. And then this pile of, stuff is maybe turned a bit at an angle and not, perpendicular to us. And maybe there's some, maybe there's like a lamp that hangs down, but there's a chain or something that comes towards us. We need something going forwards and backwards, not just side to side. That's probably the best way to say it. Then you've got, some sort of lamp. And it doesn't even have to be on, just something doing that. So, some ideas build a little more depth into it to try to draw us into the scene. Anything else? No, just make sure you're running perspective guides and making that all accurate. On the background, I didn't make a note for it, but something back here. Wait, let me back up. Two ways to do the lighting. Direct light and indirect light. You have direct light on this, so I'm going to suggest using indirect light on the background. So what you can do is you have, I'll just do it this way. So what I want to do is come back here just real quick and make some shapes, kind of follow the shapes of what's going on here. That was a terrible shape. I don't know what all this stuff is, but we're just making shapes out of it. Okay. Let's say that maybe there's different little sections. You've got like a green light thing going on. Okay. Boop. So I was thinking like what they do with some cabinets, even, you know, normal people's cabinets, where you put a light behind the subjects. And it gives this really cool kind of backlit thing going on. And this would keep you from having to actually paint a lot of work onto all of these little objects. So instead you got that backlight, but because it is over our view, it would catch whatever the ceiling is of that little alcove across there. Where's the top of it? Right there. You know, something like that would be kind of interesting. Or if you don't want it to show the top, it could be less, and it could just be very faint and just kind of coming up like that. So, some ideas there. I don't know, is that Toby? I've never seen it spelled that way. I'm going to say that it's Toby. Okay, Toby, thanks for joining the challenge. I don't recognize the name, so I don't think that you've done one before with me. Thank you for the opportunity. I was so excited to get to take it and then got sick because of course. And tell you, man, ain't that the truth? Just when I think, oh, all right, yeah, I can do that. I can take that project and this project and yeah, no problem. That's when you get sick. That's when the car, you know, breaks down, whatever. Oh, yeah, you're welcome, Nicolas. Okay, yeah, where are we starting? It's just, you get sick. I understand. So I'll kind of take that into account, but we'll look at what we can. You didn't really get to color studies, so we're not going to address that. You got as far as you were able to get. Okay, give me back up to brushes. Yep. So, number 2 is basically the idea of this scene. And I think I'm reading this scene correctly, that you've got a kitty that has knocked off something, and out of this something, a ghost of some kind has been released. I think that's the narrative that you're going with here. And also because kitty seems see-through, I'm getting the impression it's a ghost cat, which I think is fantastic. And my mind sort of runs with that. And I can only imagine that the number of creaks and scratches and odd noises and bumps in the night that you hear, they're probably ghost cats, just being little jerks. Just making noise and jumping on stuff in the middle of the night. Just a little ghost cat. So I like that idea. And I don't know if that's what you're actually doing or not, but there you go. So if that is what you're actually doing, then let's try to find a better way to tell that story. Because this is a very straightforward way to say it. It's a very flat scene, and these elements are going on. But there's a lot of this scene that's not... They're not doing anything. Like, none of this is about the subject. Only this is really important to the narrative. So maybe we can get more out of it on that line. And that's kind of with changing the idea over here. These are obviously really rough. But with this, maybe I can kind of redraw it and talk it through. we want to get more of the scene with the focal points, the things that actually tell the story. So if we're really low with the horizon line, like way down here, then you have the broken thing, glass thing, whatever this is. Then you're looking up at an extreme angle at the dresser, or whatever this is. Then there's Kitty sitting on the top. And will you see Kitty? Absolutely, because he's right there at the point, and all the perspective is going to point you up there. Then you see bits of other ones like it. So the idea that I see this one, and then I see another one up there, this one must have come from up there. So you're trying to make the connection between what just happened. Then you can see something coming out of it. You can do it that way. Not my favorite way, but that is one example. Another way would be to go from the top down, might be more effective. Like if we see the top of the cabinet. Well, let me think about, like, where is that key? There. If we have the broken thing here, and we basically use perspective based on that, so that's kind of our 1-point perspective, and then this can be based off of it. So you have Kitty sitting up here, with a little tail hanging down, and then this is coming down, and then the broken thing is here, and then we see more of the breakable things up here that he just knocked down. Maybe you have like a wall right here, because you don't really need to keep going off that scene. And then you can have like another dresser or something. And then you can have the smoky thing, not only here, but it can be like spirally up the scene, right? Ooh, and just doing that sort of thing. So, you're going down with the perspective. I personally don't feel like that's necessary. I think Ghost Cat is probably a good enough idea. You usually only need one good idea for the scene to be based around. Certainly something like this. But you might think about multiple Ghost Kitty. So instead of all this, making a scene more about that, and then you have Ghost Kitty here, and maybe he has something broken that he just broke. And then you got another kitty, and he's sitting up here, and he's sitting on the book. And then you got like this one over here, and he's trying to bat that one's tail. And it's like, I don't know why this would be. It's just this Enchanter somehow has ghost cats. And we need more stuff. Like, this is really cool. So let's just, instead of putting all that stuff down here, if we run upwards with the scene, and we have some stuff up here. And this goes up that way. And you get all your cool stuff back here. Yeah? Or you have like the candlestick. I mean, that would be pretty clear, like he knocked over the candlestick. Maybe the wax is pouring out, right? It was on fire, and then the wax is now dripping off. That would be a really good way to show the narrative. And he's like looking at it, looking down like, huh. And the wax is spilling off. Maybe this one's playing with the pages. Something on that line. I've never quite seen a scene like that, so there we go. Yeah, not so much with color. I would recommend whatever color Kitty is if you're going to go that direction, and make sure nothing else is that color. It's actually very similar to what you have here, which is all of this is basically these warm browns, but then the unique magic is this greenish color. Now, with this, if you're doing a ghost cat, not a normal cat, then what you want to do is treat it very much the same way. as that is, which is it should only show up lighter than the thing behind it. So I'm going to grab this kitty and see if we can do this simply. I don't know that it'll show up so well, but let's say we're going to do that same sort of thing back here. Now I'm going to put, like I said, this might not work very well with this lighting on this kitty, but we'll see. I'm going to get him, put him onto a layer by himself away from the background, and I'm going to set him on, let's say, lighten. And now only the lighter parts are going to show up, but I also want green kitty. So now he's starting to look like Ghost Cat. Ooh. Now we can key it into the other magic. So like that. So nothing on him can be darker than the background, right? And we could use a, no, I don't want to sample all layers. We can use a little smudge. Some of the edges maybe are a little more smoky. Right? Yeah. And maybe, like, you know, the bottoms of it, it's not even exactly clear. It just kind of Caspers off, right? So that would be an interesting effect, something on that line. And this wouldn't be a bad idea, too. I mean, you can get some photos of cats and manipulate them and see how they work. And, I mean, if you wanted to do photo bashing, you could just use the photo of the cat. Otherwise, that would even give you a better idea how to go about painting it. And instead of trying to, like, how would that work, you know? Yeah. I think that was really all I was going to cover on this one. Oh, yeah, the focal point. Yeah, on this one is like, I wasn't sure what the focal point was. It had a lot going on where it's like, is the cat the focal point? Is the ghost the focal point? And then you had like this bright red ring. I'm going to say that doesn't need to be there because there's multiple things vying for being the center of attention. This thing has a skull on it. It's very symmetrical. It's got these things next to it. It's very sharp angles. That says, oh, I should be the important thing. This one is the brightest red in the whole scene. It wants to be important. This is a living creature. It wants to be important. This is a large, shiny, ethereal thing that's taking up most of this, you know, more scene than the rest of it. So it wants to be important. Yeah. So if we can just kind of pare that back. Last one we're going to take a look at is Tyler. All right, let's pull this pick out of the way. Take a look at Tyler's stuff. Tyler says, I'm not sure if I strayed too far from the prompt. If I did, I will go with the thumbnail one. Or if you just like it more. I thought the image I picked told a cool story, though. Let me have it. I want to try to make one of these a portfolio piece. No holding back. Thank you, sir. No, I'm fine with this. You've gone with a very much more of a portrait. You're telling the whole story, but you're telling it with just this. And if you can do that, absolutely do it. And I think you can. I think you're on the right line. I think that can definitely work. You say, MB Work says, this one is mine. It's my first submission, so I wasn't fully sure of what to submit at this stage. I apologize. No, not at all. You're fine. No, I like this. I like having the portrait take compared to everybody else. It's not exactly what I outlined, But I am more concerned with you guys finding a cool image that you can be passionate about than just being a real stickler for the outline. First one, we mentioned that. Number 2. Okay, number 2 was these. I don't know why that's 2. That shouldn't be 2. Anyway, I think that's supposed to be like 6 or something. All right, my brain's starting to get a little tired. It's 10 o'clock. I've been worked all day, and I need to eat dinner. Okay, so let's wrap it up here. This scene, I don't know that square is your best option for the canvas. It's an okay option, but let's just make sure that you've considered other options. That if you have a vertical, then you get to emphasize more of the face reflection thing, where make a new layer there. If you have the head here and like the reflection, then you get to feel more of the frame with that, and it puts more focus on this is a vertical thing that's going on here, and so you can emphasize that by having more of a vertical canvas. Or if you wanted to show more of the scene, you probably want to do more like what they have here, but I would say even more so. Consider even doing, a standard wide angle that you would have on a movie. This sort of ratio. And that would have a very cinematic quality to it. And it would be a very much a second read when you notice the reflection. Because if it was a vertical, you would notice the reflection immediately, because it's emphasizing that vertical part of the image. But if you do it this way, then it's going to be, and it's going to take an extra second for that to read. So are you trying to set the scene and be kind of cinematic, or is this more of a personal shot? And that's if you want to change it. You can still keep it the square, it's nearly square. It's close. That can be okay too. I just don't think it's quite as powerful. More options if you haven't considered it. You're running with the reflection as being this dark reflection. The evil version of this thing is in the reflection. Another one to consider, that's what you have here. Another one is where you can actually see the water split, like the camera is at the water level split. And then the part of her that you see underneath the water is this really evil fish-like skeletal thing. I'm almost picturing what are those fish that just have the jaws like this, that are just like, they just look straight out of a horror film. Somebody will remember what those are called. I can't recall offhand. Anglerfish. And so she had a mouth kind of like an anglerfish, and these kind of bony, scaly body, and that you see it under the water that direction. As far as image direction, that can work too. I'm just afraid that if you go too much this way, that you'll end up copying your reference too much. So a lot of my suggestions about how to not just look like your reference photo, but make it more than that. Take it a different direction and make it something fantastical, make it something that is a piece of art. And for those who are maybe looking up here, this is one of my older pieces. So he's referencing one of my old ones. And yes, this girl was very much meant to be almost a direct copy of this girl from the classic Waterhouse painting. All right, so yeah, they are definitely sisters. Okay, now we're talking about So, like on this is a good idea, and there's a lot of good information there. But there are some things in here that you might not want for your image in the way that they're arranged. One is the distance. Do you need that much distance behind her, between her and the horizon? Or should the water level just be right here? What about the water level on the face? Is that where you want it on the face? Or did you choose that because that's what your reference had? It could be right there, where you just have the eyes coming out. Or it could be where it's further down. Or maybe her head is kind of tilted so that the water, obviously the water in the whole thing would be tilted, but maybe the water is kind of going across like that, where her head's coming out of the water. So make sure that you're considering these variations and not just following the reference. Let the reference inform the believability, but let the art direction set the course. Okay, so over here, that's running into like this. Do we need all of this in the background? If you're going to really be telling more with that shipwreck, then yes, that kind of helps tell some more. But make sure that we're getting enough out of it to warrant the fact that it's even there. Okay. That brings us into the USP, unique selling point. Right now, this just looks like a standard model in the water, which is what you referenced from. But let's move beyond that. What is unique about this person? I get that this is more humanoid. The reflection is sinister. But even this, let's have something that's just off normal. And those, I did a couple of quick ideas, like the eyes are black. Okay. Something's up with her, right? So what's up with that? Her eyes are all white. No, they just have, there's no pupil, there's no iris. It's just white. Both of those kind of make you like, what? Or like this. It's just off of normal. The eyes are just slanted a little more than normal. The eyes are spaced just a little more than normal. And she's still kind of captivating, but yeah, something feels slightly off without making her look, evil. What if she has, some sort of unique irises, right? A lot of ideas on that. Now, on this line, though, number 4, is if you're trying to make her look, that layer. If you're trying to make her look more alluring, then you probably want to increase the size of her iris. Now, over here, now this was a pretty bright day. All right, so she has very little pupils, but generally if a photographer wants to shoot a photo to make a model look sensual, sexy, that sort of thing, then they want to get her pupils really big. That's what you call bedroom eyes. And a lot of people don't notice it, but it's one of those little things to remember, that if you are in love with someone and you see that person, your pupils will dilate. They will open up. And also, of course, bedrooms are generally darker. Your pupils open up more because it's darker. And we equate larger pupils with being generally more sexy. Whereas if you gave her very small pupils, this is closer to her feeling frightened. Like if you give her really little pupils, that's not very sexy. That's like, she's freaking out, right? Her eyes are going really little. Animation really pushes it. You watch anime will really push that idea, but like the irises, the pupils to get like tiny little dots, and then if they want to make somebody look really, really sexy, then she'll just have these big, dark, glistening eyes. Yeah, it's over the top, but hey, it's cartoons. So something on that lines. Consider some options there. If you want to go more realistic, you're probably going to be something like this. Like if you look at the tones here between the two of these, her skin is extra warm and fairly bright. If you're wanting to follow that lighting, then I'm going to suggest getting a layer, setting it to dark, and I'll have mine about 30%. The normal color is this blue. But if you do put it to darken at about 30%, then you're going to put that shade over everything. And it's going to get you close to that more realistic side if you're trying to go more realistic with the overall values and skin tones and stuff. Okay. For values, light and values. I think that's kind of what I was talking about with the darken. Okay. Number 5 is the hair. Now the hair, I think you could probably do more with it than what this is. So that's a good starting point, but let's try to move beyond that and think about maybe the hair, like on this one, I did that. She came up out of the water. So if she has a lot of hair and she comes out of the water, the hair is going to pull up with her. It's going to start doing that sort of thing. So can we do it to try to tell a little more story about what's going on? Did she just come out of the water? If so, maybe her hair is kind of pooling up, right? Like this. It's going to have that effect. Or maybe she turned her head, in which case, let's see. Her hair could be kind of going around, right? And this side's kind of dragging off. So she's drifted this way and kind of turned her head. Right? We also want to think about adding maybe a bit more mystery to her by not having her perfectly, have all of her hair combed back. Maybe she's a little more rough or unkept, not rough, unkept. Where some of the hair is doing this sort of thing, like some of it's stuck kind of behind her ears, but not all of it. You've got, it's a little more wild. I want to say a little more feral, creature-like. You can kind of think about it that way. Also, bits of seaweedy stuff, maybe some little leaves, some underwater leaves, some little particles kind of in her hair, that sort of thing. Yeah. So you can play around with some variations. That's what I would suggest. I would suggest just getting this, just like kind of copying this right here. And doing a little lineup. Just make a layer over that and just play around with some variations. Okay, it could be off this way. We could have a lot more coming down in front of her face. Maybe it's doing this sort of thing. Usually don't want to obscure both eyes, but you could have maybe one eye kind of obscured. You could have that sort of thing, and the water's kind of pulling it that direction. Maybe what else is there? Maybe there's like a bigger thing of hair coming down on one side, a little less. Like on that side. So, you just want to go through those and see what you can come up with. The same thing with the eyes. Try to find something a little unique about the eyes. And again, make some variations Do some eye variations, find the one you want, and then use that as a variation to do the hair. You might do the same thing with the background, and just run through. It's like, okay, I need to find a good shape for that ship. So I'm gonna just go through and play around with some shapes for the ship and figure out what I want from that. So there you go. Okay, I think that was covering it. 4 or 5, yep, here. Looks good. You also have the choice here with yours of the color scheme and what you're wanting to do as far as realistic versus illustrative. Like this image down here has been highly edited. It has had its values really manipulated. It's had its colors very manipulated. And I'm thinking yours should be more subtle. Yours should be, more analogous. These soft tones, and not kind of strong colors. If you do put warm colors back here, I don't think you want to go that far. Probably just edging over into like some of these little violet tones. Something probably more to that line. Not all the way to yellow and orange. Turn that off for a second. So this can have a slightly warmer tone maybe in the sky. Then you get a bit of that here. But then it gets up here, it gets to be more like green. Let's put the darken layer back on. Yeah. If it was me, I think I would be going more of that direction as far as like the way the colors are going. And then if you want that edge light, and again, the edge light doesn't have to be white. With that lighting, it's not super bright, but you might get this nice little kind of pinky edge to it. And then that would even be an interesting place. I would say with the eyes either need to key off of. You can have some wonderful kind of green tones down here. And the eyes can play off of those. Or it could play off the background color and be going more towards the warm, right? Oh, there was also a reference. That reminds me of a reference image I've got to pull up earlier. Who was that? Yeah, I think it was this one, where she has like the stark eyes back there. Forgive the artistic nudity there, but the eyes on that one, same sort of thing here. That was kind of cool. That was Brahm again. This one, like this, like most of the character can be in shadow, but they have these glowing eyes. And that's even if you want to do your character a bit more towards the horror side, is where you actually have the character in a dark shadow and just the eyes are sort of glowing. Thought that one was kind of cool too. Yeah. This was a good example of kind of in water, out of water dynamic. So you could have her with like glowy eyes if you wanted to do it that way. But if you wanted to keep her more human, then maybe just keeping it darker. Then you would want the reflection, the whole reflection. Remember, the reflection is going to be darker. All this is going to be darker. Yep, along that line. Okay. Well, that wraps it up for this time. Thank you for everyone that sent in the stuff, was part of the the challenge. And thank you for everybody for joining. We will have the Vibrance episode next week. Then in 2 weeks, we will have the finals for these submissions. And of course, if you want to do your version of this image and it's giving you some ideas, then please do so. And when you do it, I would love to see what you come up with. Just share it out on the Facebook group and I'd love to take a look at it. So let me know. If you have not already joined the Facebook group, just go to swatches.group. It will link you right to that page. Ask to join. I try to go out there every evening and okay people to join in. So that would work. Anything else that I am forgetting? Nope, I think that's it for now. So thanks again. I appreciate you taking the time. Until you see you next time, keep drawing.